shadows of despair, poverty, and vulnerability. The village, nestled deep within rural India, was a tapestry of vibrant colors woven through a backdrop of crushing poverty. Families struggled to survive on meager earnings from farming or laboring. Their homes, often makeshift structures of mud and thatch, offered little protection from the elements. It was in these forgotten corners of the country, where hope flickered dimly, the traffickers found their prey. These predators, often disguised as saviors, exploited the villagers' desperation. They lured families with promises of better lives for their children, offering opportunities for education or employment in distant cities. Parents, blinded by their desire to provide a brighter future, entrusted their sons and daughters to these wolves in sheep's clothing. Little did they know that their children were being condemned to a life of unimaginable horror. This is the story of India's hidden struggle, a harrowing reality that exists in the shadows of a nation striving for progress.
Ensnared dreams Lakshmi's story. Lakshmi was just 12 when her life was stolen. She was bright and cheerful, her laughter echoing through the village. One day, a woman arrived, her clothes shimmering with elegance. She offered to take Lakshmi to the city for work and education. Blinded by hope, Lakshmi's parents agreed. Instead, Lakshmi found herself in a cramped, squalid room. She worked long hours, cooking and cleaning. She faced verbal and physical abuse, her every move controlled.
False promises shattered lives. Sunita's struggle. Sunita, a young woman with dreams of a better life, fell prey to the allure of false promises. Hailing from a poverty-stricken village in rural India, she yearned for an escape from the drudgery of her existence. When a man arrived in her village, promising lucrative employment opportunities in a distant city, Sunita saw it as a glimmer of hope. Eager to break free from the shackles of poverty, Sunita convinced her family to let her go. They were apprehensive, their hearts heavy with the thought of their daughter venturing out into the unknown. But Sunita, fueled by dreams of a brighter future, was determined to seize this opportunity. Upon arriving in the city, Sunita's dreams turned to dust. Instead of the promised jobs, she found herself trapped in a brothel, her life reduced to a commodity to be bought and sold. She was forced into prostitution, her body violated, her spirit crushed under the weight of exploitation and abuse. Sunita's story is a stark reminder of the insidious nature of human trafficking.
A son's ordeal. Gomer's fight for freedom. Gomer, a young boy, became a victim of India's trafficking industry. His family struggled to make ends meet. A man offered to take Gomer to a city for work. They entrusted their son, hoping for a better life. Instead, Gomer found himself trapped. He was forced to work long hours in a brick kiln. Malnourished and abused, Gomer's story reflects the horrors faced by trafficked children.
The traffickers, driven by insatiable greed, are the architects of this human misery. They are masters of manipulation, skilled at identifying and exploiting vulnerability. They operate in the shadows, their networks extending like a web across villages, towns, and cities. They prey on the hopes and dreams of the poor and marginalized, offering false promises of a better life. Some pose as recruitment agents, promising lucrative jobs in distant cities. Others befriend families, gaining their trust before luring their children away with promises of education or marriage. Once they have lured their victims away from their homes, the traffickers exert their control through a combination of violence, coercion, and psychological manipulation. They confiscate their victims' identity documents, cutting them off from their families and any support systems. They instill fear and obedience, breaking down their victims' spirits and leaving them feeling helpless and alone. The traffickers are motivated solely by profit, viewing their victims as nothing more than commodities to be bought, sold, and exploited. The trafficking industry in India thrives on a toxic mix of poverty, social inequality, and systemic failures. Corruption is rampant, with law enforcement officials often turning a blind eye to trafficking operations in exchange for bribes. The legal system, burdened by bureaucracy and inefficiency, often fails to provide justice to victims. Prosecutions are rare, and convictions even more so. The lack of accountability for traffickers emboldens them, allowing them to operate with impunity.
They know that the chances of facing legal consequences are slim, and they exploit this to their advantage.
The victims, on the other hand, are often too afraid to speak out, fearing retribution from their traffickers or further stigmatization from society. This lack of justice perpetuates a vicious cycle. Scars of trauma, the long road to healing. The physical and emotional scars of trafficking run deep, leaving victims with a lifetime of trauma. Many suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and a range of other mental health issues. The physical abuse they endure often leaves them with lasting injuries, while the psychological manipulation can shatter their self-esteem and sense of self-worth. The road to healing for trafficking survivors is long and arduous. They require specialized care and support to address the complex trauma they have experienced. This includes access to mental health services, medical care, legal aid, and social support systems. However, access to such services remains limited, particularly in rural areas. Voices of resilience from victim to survivor to advocate. Despite the horrors they have endured, many trafficking survivors emerge from the shadows with remarkable resilience. They find the strength to reclaim their lives, their voices rising above the trauma to speak out against the injustice they have faced. They transform their pain into purpose, becoming powerful advocates for change. These survivors challenge the stigma associated with trafficking, sharing their stories to raise awareness and demand justice. They work with NGOs and government agencies to improve support services for survivors, advocating for stronger laws and policies to combat trafficking. Their courage and determination are an inspiration, demonstrating the indomitable spirit of the human will. Their voices are crucial in the fight against trafficking. Breaking the chains, organizations, and initiatives, combating trafficking. The fight against human trafficking in India is a multifaceted challenge that requires a collaborative approach. Numerous organizations and initiatives are working tirelessly to combat trafficking, rescue victims, and provide them with the support they need to rebuild their lives. Non-governmental organizations play a critical role in this effort. They work on the ground, identifying and rescuing victims, providing them with shelter, medical care, counseling, and legal aid. They also conduct awareness campaigns in vulnerable communities, educating people about the dangers of trafficking and empowering them to protect themselves and their children. The government of India has taken some steps to address the issue of trafficking, enacting legislation such as the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act and the Protection of Children from Sexual Offenses Act. However, implementation of these laws remains weak, and much more needs to be done to ensure that traffickers are brought to justice and victims are protected. The fight against human trafficking requires a sustained and coordinated effort from all stakeholders. A call to action. Our role in creating a brighter future. The fight against human trafficking is not a spectator sport. It demands the active participation of each and every one of us. We must all become part of the solution, using our voices and actions to create a world where human trafficking is relegated to the dustbin of history. Educate yourself and others. The first step in combating trafficking is to educate ourselves about the issue. Learn about the different forms of trafficking, the tactics used by traffickers, and the signs of exploitation. Share this information with your family, friends, and colleagues to raise awareness and encourage them to join the fight. Support organizations working to combat trafficking. Many organizations are working tirelessly on the front lines to rescue victims, provide them with support, and advocate for change. Support their efforts by donating your time, money, or resources. By working together, we can create a world where every individual is free to live a life of dignity and respect.